Alrighty, hi everyone. I'm Vanessa. I work for a large utility company, and this GridGuide smart assistance is mainly for utility field workers. So, in my day job, I work to largely put together a RAG enterprise application, and I figured that this proof of concept would be helpful in the long run to be able to ingest into that productionized version. All right, so what is GridGuide? Generally, it's a tool that I've designed for utility workers to access these different grid code regulations. We have a lot of different engineering reports and manuals. It's very jargon heavy and context specific. So it would really a perfect application for a RAG type of chatbot or virtual assistant. And then I also figured because a lot of times our field workers are out in inclement weather for things like routine maintenance, it would also be helpful to have the weather information from the National Weather Service through an API be hooked up so that we could look at things like risk assessment or if we have to switch around our schedules for different maintenance opportunities as well. So the three primary components here are efficiency. So we're providing that instant access to these grid code regulations, specifically on our national electricity transmission system. And then safety with the real-time weather risk assessment. And then last but not least, compliance is really infiltrated into everything that we do from a regulatory standpoint. So we can ask it things like, what's the maximum voltage that should be on this specific power line? So you can imagine if I'm, getting onboarded as a new engineer and my manager comes to me with some jargon heavy thing, and actually let me pull up the PDF to show you kind of what these manuals look like. They're extremely technically dense. There's a whole glossary associated with them. And so maybe I don't understand a specific terminology. So instead of me having to go ask another coworker, what is a black start test, for example, I would be able to just ask this bot simply. So as I mentioned, two primary components. It's a natural language interface for these different technical regulations. Hopefully this improves things like faster onboarding time for new engineers. And then we also have weather insights for specific location data, so you can enter your zip code. We also have voice integration because we hear a lot that our field workers are wearing really bulky gloves and they're not able to, use their thumbs on a mobile app to be able to text. So that voice dictation really helps them if they're driving or in weather and they don't want to be able to pull out all of their different instruments and devices and things like that as well. Okay, so here's a screenshot, but I will walk through a demo as well. So like I mentioned, we do have that speech to text. This is using the Whisper model, and then we ensure that the transcription is correct within the Streamlit app so they can make sure that it's edited appropriately. It actually captured what they said accurately before shooting off and actually processing the request. We're just using OpenAI under the hood here. And then in this specific example, this is the weather API. So we're looking at the current conditions, and this is all agentic in nature, whether they ask about the weather or they ask about the grid code manual regulations, it would be able to understand which node it has to get passed to and then come back with the appropriate response. So in this case, for the weather, we get the current conditions, and I've done a little bit of generative UI work here. So based on the tool that gets called, I've designed it to be a little bit nicer than just the text output. And then we can also see, for example, the extended forecast in different widgets here. Here's an example of that context or domain specific terminology. So in this case, I asked what's a synchronous generating unit, and it comes back with very specific utility type of answers. So things like the different hertz or different frequencies of the grid that's being generated, and all in a nice, easy to understand format. For the tech stack, before I jump to the demo here, so I am using Whisper for the speech to text. All the embeddings are OpenAI, but I also did fine tune an Arctic model. Didn't have as good of luck with that, so kind of stuck to the basics and what works right now. It's all hooked up through LangChain and LangSmith, so we can look at all the observability and latency. And eventually it would be nice to be able to look at things like thumbs down responses to make sure that we can evaluate appropriately there. For the vector store, I just wanted something quick and simple, so Quadrant for fast retrieval. And then this is all within Streamlit for the generative UI, just as a prototype right now. But the long-term vision is that, yes, we will probably be ingesting this into the overall productionized version of this application that we have running right now with about 6,000 users. Okay, great. Let me jump over to the demo. So this is just my local instance, but let me just pull up an example here. Copy this black start test. What is a black start test here? And it will go ahead and process the request in a few seconds. So we can see that it comes back with specific terminology relating to the National Grid Electricity Transmission, which is a specific business unit that I work under. And then I can also test out the voice dictation here as well. What's the weather like in Rensselaer, New York? So in this case, in a couple of seconds here, we were able to also transcribe it. So this is extremely handy, again, if I'm trying to plan my day as a field worker, going out into the field, maybe there's a thunderstorm coming up this afternoon. I quickly can get this report, click that, yes, it was able to capture the transcription appropriately. Now it's going to the National Weather Service, so we want to make sure that we have really accurate and reliable information. My background is actually in meteorology, and certainly not all weather APIs are as accurate as this one. So a nice ground source and trusted source here. And then we can also do things like look at the different drop downs for the extended forecast or just the current conditions. One thing that we're really heavily eyeing all the time is the wind speed. So if it gets above a certain mile per hour, there can be, serious implications in terms of our vegetation management and icing during winter storms and all the like. So hopefully this actually, gains some traction and gets put into the larger prototype. But for right now, it was a really fun weekend project to be able to keep iterating on. And yeah, we'll see where it goes. But thanks for listening.